Can your maid even read? Because every time I give her instructions, I have to repeat myself like I'm training an animal.
Gregory Ashford said that into a microphone. 200 guests heard it. Nobody stopped him. Then he made his announcement.
$1 million to anyone in this room who can speak fluent Japanese with our honored guest from Tokyo.
He grinned, loosened his tie.
And I do mean anyone.
He pointed at Willa Brooks, standing by the service door, and
even her, though I doubt she finished high school, let alone learned a language. That actually requires intelligence.
The crowd laughed. Willa stared back at him, steady. Then she said,
I'll do it.
Gregory blinked, then laughed harder than anyone. But he didn't know that Japanese was her strongest of 6 languages. And what happened next shattered everything he believed. But let's rewind, because this moment didn't come from nowhere. 2 days before the gala, the Ashford estate was chaos. Caterers shouting orders, florists hauling white roses through the back entrance, lighting crews dragging cables across the lawn. The whole place smelled like furniture polish and fresh paint. Willow was downstairs in the staff quarters, a small room off the kitchen, fluorescent light buzzing overhead. She was folding linens, alone, with her earbuds in. She wasn't listening to music. She was listening to a Japanese podcast. And she wasn't just listening. She was answering back. Full sentences. Fluid. Natural. She even laughed at something the host said, like she was having a conversation with an old friend. That's when Carl Davis walked in. Carl was the head of household staff, a black man in his late 40s who had worked in service for 22 years. He'd seen a lot in this house. He knew how to read rooms. He knew how to protect his people. And he knew when to stay quiet. He froze in the doorway. He'd heard Willa speak Spanish with the gardening crew. He'd caught her switching to French on the phone once. But this was different. This was Japanese. And it wasn't broken. It wasn't hesitant. It was the kind of fluency that made you forget she'd never left the country. He set the schedule on the counter, didn't say a word, walked out. In the hallway, he stopped, leaned against the wall, stared at nothing for a long moment. Carl didn't tell anyone what he heard that night. Not yet. But something shifted behind his eyes. The look of a man holding a secret he wasn't sure the world deserved to know. Now here's what made all of this matter. In 48 hours, Gregory Ashford was hosting his annual Foundation Gala. 200 guests, black tie. The theme this year was Bridging Cultures. The guest of honor was Mr. Furusawa, CEO of a Japanese corporation worth billions. Gregory had been chasing a $50 million deal with him for over a year. He'd hired a professional interpreter. Every detail was planned down to the napkin folds. But plans have a way of falling apart when the wrong person turns out to be the right one. The morning before the gala, the estate was a machine running at full speed. Every room was being transformed, every surface wiped, polished, perfected. Willow was assigned to prepare the guest suite for Mr. Furusawa and his delegation. She was making the bed, smoothing the sheets with practiced hands, arranging fresh towels in neat rows. Samantha Moore walked in without knocking, clipboard in hand, eyes on the page. She didn't look at Willow once. "Make sure there's green tea in the room. They're Japanese, they'll want tea. And take the Bible off the nightstand. Put something, I don't know, Eastern." Willa paused, her hands still on the pillow. Then, quietly, "Mr. Furusawa is from Osaka. Guests from that region usually prefer coffee, actually. And his company biography mentions he's a practicing Catholic." Samantha looked up for the first time. She stared at Willa like she'd just heard a dog recite poetry. "How do you know that?" "I read the briefing packet on the kitchen counter. It was in Japanese." Silence. A long one. Samantha blinked twice. Then she straightened her clipboard and said, "Just do the tea anyway." She walked out without another word. Willa stood there for a moment. Her expression wasn't anger. It wasn't hurt. It was something quieter than both. The look of someone who had offered a gift and watched it get handed back unopened. She finished the pillows, moved on. That afternoon, things got interesting. The advance team from Furusawa's corporation arrived early. 2 young Japanese associates checking logistics for the next evening. They ended up in the kitchen, trying to explain dietary restrictions to the head chef. One had a severe shellfish allergy. The other followed a Buddhist vegetarian practice on certain days. They were using hand gestures, pointing at ingredients. The chef was getting frustrated, wiping sweat from his forehead, shaking his head. Nobody was understanding anybody. Willa walked in carrying a tray of polished silverware. She heard the struggle, set the tray down, and without hesitation, without permission, she turned to the 2 associates and spoke in Japanese. Clean, polite, Osaka accented. The kitchen went quiet. The clatter of pots stopped. A burner hissed under a forgotten pan. The 2 associates stared at her. Their faces moved from confusion to shock to pure delight. One of them actually laughed. Not at her, from the sheer unexpected joy of being understood in a place where no one could reach them. She translated everything. Shellfish allergy, vegetarian days, specific ingredients to avoid. The chef scribbled notes, nodding fast. Problem solved in 90 seconds. The associates bowed to Willa. One of them said something warm in Japanese. The narrator translates. Your Japanese is beautiful. Where did you study? Willa smiled. Small. Private. The Detroit Public Library, 3rd floor, section 495.6. They stared at her. She picked up her tray and walked out. Now here's what Willa didn't know. Those 2 associates picked up their phones the moment she left. They called their senior colleague, who called someone above him. The information started traveling up the chain, toward Mr. Furusawa himself. But that part comes later. What happened next was closer to home. Carl Davis had been standing in the kitchen doorway the entire time. He watched the whole thing. Watched Willa speak Japanese like she was born in Osaka. Watched 2 strangers bow to a woman who earns less in a year than Gregory spends on champagne in a month. He pulled her aside in the hallway. You know you just did something, right? Willa shrugged. I just helped with dinner. Carl shook his head slowly. No, you didn't. He looked at her with something caught between pride and worry. Pride because he knew what she was. Worry because he knew what this house does to people who shine too bright in the wrong uniform. Word was already spreading through the estate. A maid who speaks Japanese. A maid who corrected the event coordinator. A maid who knows more than she's supposed to. And in a house like Gregory Ashford's, that kind of knowledge is dangerous. To understand what Willa Brooks could do, you have to understand where she came from. She was born in Detroit. Her mother died when she was 4. No father in the picture. By the time she was 12, she'd lived in 6 different foster homes. 6 different beds. 6 different sets of rules from people who weren't her family. In the 3rd foster home, there was an older girl from Haiti. She spoke Creole, couldn't speak English. Every night she cried through the thin wall between their rooms. Willa was 9 years old. She couldn't comfort this girl, couldn't reach her, so she walked to the public library, found a Creole language book that was almost bigger than her lap, and started teaching herself. 3 weeks later, she whispered through the wall in broken Creole, "You're not alone. I'm here." The crying stopped. That was the first language Willa taught herself. Not for a grade, not for a career, to reach someone no one else would talk to. After that, it became a pattern. Every foster home brought a new world. Spanish from the family next door, French from a Senegalese church group. After high school, working cleaning jobs, she picked up Portuguese from a Brazilian coworker, then Mandarin from free online courses. Japanese came last. She found a box of donated Japanese novels at a library book sale. She couldn't read a single word. She bought the whole box for $6. Then she bought a Japanese-English dictionary for $2. Worn cover, cracked spine. She carried that dictionary everywhere. Still does. Right now, it's sitting in her apron pocket. Willa has no degree, no certificate, no formal training in any language. Everything she knows, she pulled from the world with her bare hands. So why does she stay quiet about it? Because she learned the hard way. Past employers didn't react well when the help knew more than the boss. Suspicion, resentment. One even fired her on the spot. People don't like it when the maid is the smartest person in the room. So Willa made herself small, kept her head down, let them see the uniform and nothing else. But armor only works until someone sees through it. The evening before the gala, the hired interpreter arrived. Her name was Ms. Caldwell. Expensive suit, Ivy League credentials. $5,000 for 2 nights of work. She walked into the rehearsal room like she owned the building. Gregory watched from the back, arms crossed, satisfied. This was the woman who would seal his $50 million deal. Then Mr. Furusawa's delegation sat down, and within 20 minutes, everything started to crack. Ms. Caldwell spoke textbook Tokyo Standard Japanese. Perfect grammar, perfect pronunciation. The kind of Japanese you learn in a classroom. Mr. Furusawa and his team spoke Kansai dialect, the Japanese of Osaka, looser, warmer, full of regional slang and humor that doesn't exist in any textbook. Mr. Furusawa made a joke, a classic Osaka-style joke, self-deprecating, dry. Ms. Caldwell translated it word for word, literally. The humor vanished. The room went awkward. Mr. Furusawa's smile faded. Gregory didn't understand Japanese, but he could feel the temperature in the room dropping. He leaned over to Derek Williams and snapped, "I'm paying this woman $5,000 and she can't even make them laugh?" Willow was in the room, serving water, moving between chairs, invisible the way she'd trained herself to be. She heard the joke Mr. Furusawa made. She caught every word. She almost smiled. Almost. And Mr. Furusawa noticed. Just a flicker, the maid's mouth twitching at a joke that the professional interpreter missed completely. He filed that away, said nothing. Willa kept pouring water, head down, hands steady. After the rehearsal, the hallway was empty. Almost. The 2 young associates from the kitchen found her. They spoke quickly in Japanese, voices low, almost conspiratorial. They told her the interpreter was struggling, that Mr. Furusawa was frustrated, that the energy was wrong. Then one of them asked, "Can you help, even informally, just behind the scenes?" Willa hesitated. She looked down the hallway toward the staff quarters. Her world. Then she looked the other direction, toward the rehearsal room, a world she had never been invited into. She shook her head gently. "I'm just here to clean." The associate looked at her for a long moment, then said, "That's not what your Japanese says." Willa didn't answer. She picked up her tray and walked away. But someone else had been watching. Derek Williams, Gregory's personal assistant. He saw the whole exchange. A maid, speaking Japanese, with the delegation, in the hallway of his boss's estate. He didn't think, that's impressive. He didn't think, that could be useful. He thought, that's a problem. He went straight to Gregory. "Your maid was talking to the Japanese guests, in Japanese." Gregory's reaction wasn't curiosity. It wasn't gratitude. It was annoyance. Then suspicion. "Tell her to stay in the back rooms tomorrow night. I don't want the help mingling with guests." The order came down through Samantha Moore. Willa was reassigned. No more floor service at the gala. Kitchen duty only. She would not be seen. Samantha delivered the news in the service corridor. Quick, cold, like reading a parking ticket. Willa was holding a stack of freshly pressed tablecloths. She listened, nodded once, said, "Understood." Then she turned and walked away, down the service corridor, past the bare walls, past the spot where a mirror should have been but wasn't. Her grip on the tablecloths tightened, just slightly, the only sign that anything had landed. She'd been punished, not for doing something wrong, for doing something right while wearing the wrong uniform. And now, on the biggest night of the year, the best Japanese speaker in the building would be locked in the kitchen. Or so they thought. The morning of the gala, the estate had a hierarchy, and if you worked there long enough, you didn't need anyone to explain it. You felt it. Gregory Ashford at the top, then his wife Elena, then Derek, then Samantha, then the catering team. Then, at the very bottom, below the line where anyone bothered to look, the cleaning staff. Willa put on her kitchen uniform, black pants, black shirt, hair tied back. She looked at the worn Japanese dictionary sitting on her bed, considered leaving it behind. Then she picked it up and slid it into her apron pocket, where it always was. There were no mirrors in the staff corridor, not one. The people who spent their lives making everything beautiful were never given a chance to see themselves. The narrator doesn't say this is a metaphor. It doesn't need to be said. In the kitchen, two housekeepers were talking, both Latina. They spoke in Spanish, not knowing Willa understood every word. One said, "I heard she got moved to kitchen duty because she was showing off with the Japanese guests." The other shook her head. "She wasn't showing off. She was just being herself. That's the problem." Willa stood around the corner, heard it all, said nothing, kept walking. Being yourself. A punishable offense in the wrong house. Later, Willa found herself alone in the kitchen pantry. Cases of champagne stacked to the ceiling, silver trays waiting to be loaded, the muffled sound of decorators shouting orders upstairs. She took out her phone, opened a language learning app, started a Japanese lesson, then closed it, opened a job listing site, scrolled past translation firm after translation firm. Every single one wanted the same things: a degree, a certification, references from universities, not kitchens. She stared at the screen. The door was right there. She could see it. She'd always been able to see it. But every handle was shaped for hands that carried diplomas, not dish rags. She closed the phone, put it away, went back to stacking trays. The cruelest prisons are the ones with open doors and no stairs. While Willa was stacking trays in the basement, Gregory Ashford was upstairs, rehearsing his speech in front of a bathroom mirror. The speech was about global unity, breaking barriers, embracing diversity. He practiced his pauses, adjusted his smile, made sure the words sounded like he meant them. Then Derek knocked on the door. "Did you handle the Maid situation?" Gregory didn't look away from the mirror. "Which one?" "The one who speaks Japanese." "She's in the kitchen. She won't be a problem." He went back to rehearsing. A speech about inclusion, delivered by a man who just locked his most talented employee in a basement. He never saw the contradiction. That's the thing about men like Gregory. They build stages to talk about equality, then step over the people who prove it exists. By 6 o'clock, the estate was transformed. 200 chairs, crystal everywhere, white roses on every table, a string quartet warming up in the corner. The guests began arriving. Black suits, long dresses, the sound of expensive shoes on marble, the soft pop of champagne corks, laughter that floated above everything like perfume. Downstairs, Willa tied her apron, checked her pocket. The dictionary was there. Upstairs, Ms. Caldwell reviewed her notes. Her hands were shaking slightly. She'd spent the afternoon studying Kansai dialect online. It wasn't enough. She knew it wasn't enough. The gala was about to begin. The interpreter was already failing, and the only person who could save the night was locked behind a kitchen door. Something had to give. The gala opened like a performance, and in many ways that's exactly what it was. 200 guests moved through the ballroom like silk and shadow. The string quartet played something soft and European. Champagne towers caught the light from 3 crystal chandeliers. The air smelled like white roses and old money. Mr. Furusawa arrived with his delegation. 6 men in dark suits. Formal. Measured. Every handshake precise. Gregory greeted them at the entrance with his biggest smile and his firmest grip. Ms. Caldwell stood beside him. Ready. Professional. Nervous. The first hour was fine. Surface-level conversation. Compliments about the estate. Small talk about the flight from Osaka. Ms. Caldwell handled it. Stiff but functional. Then came the private meeting. Gregory, Mr. Furusawa, and their teams gathered in the East drawing room. This was the real event. The $50 million conversation. Everything before this was decoration. Mr. Furusawa spoke about the values of his company: family, legacy, mutual respect between generations. Ms. Caldwell translated. But she translated the word for mutual respect between families as profitable partnership. Mr. Furusawa caught it. His expression cooled. Not anger. Something worse. Disappointment. He responded with a proverb. Fast. In thick Kansai dialect. Ms. Caldwell froze. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She asked him to repeat it. He did. She stumbled through a translation that made no sense. The room tensed. Gregory could feel the deal slipping like sand through his fingers. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the silence that followed them. He excused himself, stepped into the hallway, grabbed Derek by the arm. Get me someone who can actually speak Japanese. Now! Derek swallowed. Sir, the only person in this building who... No, not her. There's no one else. Gregory stared at him. His jaw tightened. His pride fought his desperation. Desperation won. Get her. Now. Samantha Moore appeared in the kitchen doorway like she'd swallowed broken glass. Willa was plating appetizers, hands steady, movements precise. Mr. Ashford needs you, in the East drawing room. Now. Willa didn't look up. For what? Samantha could barely say it. To translate. The kitchen went quiet. Every cook, every server, every pair of hands stopped moving. Willa set down the plate she was holding, wiped her hands on her apron, looked across the kitchen at Carl Davis, who was standing near the walk-in cooler. Carl gave her a single, slow nod. The same nod from before. Willa untied her kitchen apron, folded it, set it on the counter. Underneath her plain black work clothes. She reached into her pocket. The dictionary was still there. She left it in. Then she walked out of the kitchen. The shift was immediate. Kitchen noise behind her, clanking pots, sizzling oil, shouted orders. Then the hallway. Silence. Carpet under her feet after hours on concrete. The distant sound of the string quartet getting closer with every step. She entered the East drawing room. Gregory didn't introduce her, didn't say her name, didn't even look at her. He just pointed at Mr. Furusawa and said, "Tell him we value the partnership." Willa turned to Mr. Furusawa. She didn't translate Gregory's words. Instead, she bowed. A proper bow, respectful, unhurried. Then she spoke, In warm, fluid Kansai Japanese, the narrator translates. Mr. Furusawa, please forgive the confusion earlier. We are truly honored by your presence in this home. Mr. Furusawa's eyes widened. He leaned forward, responded in rapid dialect. Willa answered naturally. A real conversation began. For the first time all evening, Mr. Furusawa smiled. Gregory watched. He didn't understand a single word, but he understood the shift in energy. And for the first time, he looked at Willa. Actually looked at her. Not everyone in that room was blind. Among the 200 guests was a man named Douglas Pennington. White-haired, calm. The kind of man who listens more than he speaks and never wastes a word when he does. Pennington was the CEO of Pennington & Cole Global, one of the largest international consulting firms in the country. He'd known Gregory for years, attended his galas, shook his hand, smiled at his speeches, and quietly, privately, couldn't stand the man's performative generosity. But tonight, Pennington wasn't watching Gregory. He was watching Willa. He'd seen Ms. Caldwell struggle from across the room. He'd seen the maid get summoned from the kitchen. He'd seen the bow. And he'd seen something that most people in this room missed entirely. The moment Willa opened her mouth, Mr. Furusawa's posture changed. His shoulders dropped. His chin lifted. The wall came down. Pennington had spent 30 years doing business in Asia. He spoke basic conversational Japanese himself, enough to know that what Willa was doing wasn't just translating. She was building a bridge in real time, word by word, sentence by sentence. He waited, didn't interrupt, watched the entire 15-minute exchange between Gregory and Furusawa. Watched the deal get back on track. Watched Gregory take credit with his eyes, while Willa did the work with her voice. When it was over, Willa slipped out of the room quietly, the way she always did, head down, invisible again. Pennington followed her into the hallway. "Excuse me." Willa turned, surprised. Nobody followed the maid. Pennington spoke to her in Japanese, simple, respectful. "Your Kansai dialect is remarkable. Where did you train?" Willa blinked. Someone else in this building spoke Japanese. She hadn't expected that. She answered in Japanese. "I didn't train anywhere formal. I learned on my own." Pennington paused, studied her face, not the way Gregory studied people, looking for weakness. The way a man studies something rare, trying to understand its full dimension. Then he switched to English. "I've hired interpreters from the best programs in the country, Georgetown, Middlebury, the Defense Language Institute. You're better than most of them." Willa didn't know what to say. She looked down. "Thank you, sir." "What's your name?" "Willa Brooks." He repeated it, slowly, like he was filing it somewhere permanent. Willa Brooks. I'm going to remember that name. He nodded once, then walked back into the gala. Willa stood alone in the hallway, the muffled sound of music and laughter on the other side of the wall. She pressed her back against the cool plaster, closed her eyes, just for a second. Nobody had ever said that to her before. Not a teacher, not an employer, not anyone. I'm going to remember that name. 5 words. And they landed harder than the insult Gregory had thrown at her in front of 200 people. Back inside, Pennington found a colleague, a board member of a National Language Institute. He leaned in close and said simply, "There's someone here you need to meet before the night is over." He didn't explain further. He didn't need to. Between dinner courses, Willa slipped outside. The garden behind the estate was quiet. A different world from the noise inside. Night air, crickets, the smell of jasmine drifting from somewhere she couldn't see. The gala was muffled behind glass doors, reduced to a golden glow and distant laughter. She sat on a stone bench, alone, took the worn dictionary from her apron pocket, ran her thumb across the cover the way someone touches a photograph of a person they miss. The spine was cracked. The pages were soft from years of turning. In the margins, pencil notes in her own handwriting. Definitions she'd added at 16. Corrections she'd made at 19. New words she'd discovered at 23. A whole life written between someone else's lines. She didn't hear him approach. Mr. Furusawa stepped into the garden. He'd also needed air. The performance inside was exhausting for everyone, even the guest of honor. He saw Willa, recognized her, walked over without hesitation. They spoke in Japanese. No protocol, no business, no agenda. Just two people talking under a dark sky. He asked about the dictionary. She told him, "Library sale, $2. He laughed. Not the polite laugh of a CEO. A real one. Warm. Full of something that might have been recognition. Then he said something. The narrator holds the translation for a beat. An Osaka proverb. The deepest rivers make the least noise. He looked at her, steady. Then he said, "You are the deepest river in that house." Willa's eyes filled. She didn't cry, but she looked away, toward the garden lights, toward something far past them. It was the look of someone who had spent years carrying something heavy in silence and just heard another person say, "I see it. I see you." Mr. Furusawa reached into his jacket, produced a business card. Not a corporate card, a personal one. He wrote a phone number on the back, handed it to her. In Japanese, he said, "When you are ready to stop being invisible, call this number." He bowed. She bowed back. Deeper than protocol, deeper than politeness, the bow of two people who understood each other in a language that had nothing to do with words. He walked back inside. Willa looked at the card, then at the dictionary in her other hand. Two small objects. One cost $2 at a library sale. The other could change her life. She put them both in her apron pocket, side by side. The old life and the new life. Sitting together, waiting. She wasn't ready to choose yet, but for the first time she believed there was a choice to make. After dinner, the gala moved to the grand ballroom. This was the main event. The part Gregory Ashford had been planning for months. 200 guests settled into their seats. The chandeliers dimmed to a warm gold. The string quartet stopped playing. The room fell into the kind of silence that only money can buy. Gregory took the stage. He looked good up there. Tailored suit, confident smile. The spotlight loved him. He opened with a joke about international business. The crowd laughed on cue. Then his voice shifted, louder, more theatrical. "I've always believed that talent can come from anywhere, that greatness doesn't care about your background, your title, or where you went to school." He paused, let the words land. "So tonight, I want to put my money where my mouth is." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a check, held it up. $1 million, cash. To anyone in this room who can speak fluent Japanese and hold a 5-minute conversation with our honored guest, Mr. Furusawa. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a few nervous laughs. Gregory was enjoying the theater. Then he added the line he'd been saving, the one that was supposed to be funny, and I mean anyone. He scanned the room with a grin. Staff included. His eyes landed on the kitchen doors. Though I think we all know the odds on that one. The room laughed. Gregory laughed. Everyone laughed. Everyone except two people. Douglas Pennington, who set his champagne glass down without a sound, and Carl Davis, standing by the service door, who turned his head and looked across the ballroom. He found Willa. She was standing in the shadows near the kitchen entrance, still in her black work clothes, still invisible, still watching. Their eyes met across 200 people, 3 chandeliers, and a lifetime of being overlooked. Carl gave her the nod, the same one, slow, certain. Willa didn't move, not right away. She looked at the stage, at Gregory bathing in his own spotlight, at the check in his hand, at the 200 faces turned toward him like flowers toward the sun. Then she stepped forward, out of the shadows, into the light. The first person to notice was a woman in the 3rd row. She nudged her husband. He turned. Then the couple next to them. Then the row behind. A ripple of heads turning, one by one, like dominoes falling in slow motion. A maid, in black work clothes, walking toward the stage. The ballroom went quiet. Not polite quiet, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat. Someone in the back whispered loud enough to carry. "Is she serious?" Gregory saw her coming. His smile froze, then it shifted into amusement. He actually laughed. "Well, this should be interesting." He gestured to the open floor with a sweep of his arm. "By all means." Willa walked past the front row, past Elena Ashford, whose hand went to her mouth, past Derek Williams, whose face went white, past Ms. Caldwell, who looked away, the sound of her flat shoes on the hardwood floor. Every step audible, every step deliberate. The rustle of her work clothes among 200 outfits that cost more than her car. She stopped in front of Mr. Furusawa. The room held its breath. She bowed. Not a quick nod, a full, proper bow, the kind that carries centuries of respect in its curve. Mr. Furusawa stood, bowed back, deeper than protocol required, because he already knew. Then Willa spoke. The narrator doesn't translate right away. Instead, the narrator describes what the room sees. 200 people watching a black woman in work clothes speak Japanese to a Japanese billionaire. And the billionaire leaning in, nodding, responding with increasing animation, smiling, then laughing. Now the narrator translates. She referenced Dotonbori, a district in Osaka, Mr. Furusawa's favorite place as a child. His eyes lit up like a boy remembering home. She quoted a line from Matsuo Basho, a Japanese poet, connected it to the evening's theme of bridging cultures. Mr. Furusawa looked at her with open admiration. Then she made a joke, a wordplay in Kansai dialect, the kind only a native-level speaker would catch. Mr. Furusawa laughed. A real laugh. Full body, no restraint. His delegation laughed. The 2 young associates from the kitchen were grinning ear to ear. 5 minutes became 10. Nobody stopped them. Nobody dared. Now, look at Gregory. The narrator tracks every shift on his face like a slow-motion earthquake. First, amusement. This will be funny. Then, confusion. Wait, she's actually speaking Japanese? Then, disbelief. She's not just speaking it, she's commanding the room. Then, realization. She's better than the $5,000 interpreter. Then, shame. Raw, undeniable. The kind that starts in the stomach and rises until it chokes you. His hands gripped the podium. His jaw locked. The smile was gone. What replaced it was the particular devastation of a man realizing that the person he stepped over every single day was the most extraordinary person in the room. His eyes filled. He turned away from the crowd. His shoulders shook. Once. Twice. Derek reached for him. Gregory waved him off, the sharp click of his fingers releasing the podium edge. The quiet gasp from Elena in the front row. The string quartet, which had been playing softly underneath everything, stopped. Silence. Then, Mr. Furusawa finished the conversation. He stood tall, turned to face the room, and spoke in English. The first English he had used all evening. I have traveled to 30 countries. I have met diplomats, translators, and scholars from the finest universities in the world. He paused, looked at Willa. This woman is the finest interpreter I have ever encountered. The room didn't clap right away. There was a beat, a held breath, the kind of silence that happens right before something breaks open. Then it came. Not polite applause. Something raw. Chairs pushing back. People standing. The sound of 200 people releasing everything they'd been holding since a woman in work clothes walked out of the kitchen and changed the temperature of the room. Willa stood in the spotlight. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her sides. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She didn't perform. She just stood there, letting herself be seen. For the first time in her life, she didn't disappear. The applause faded, but the question didn't. It hung in the ballroom like smoke. 200 people thinking the same thing. Nobody willing to say it first. What about the $1 million? Gregory was still at the podium, his hands flat on the surface, his head slightly bowed. The man who had commanded every room he'd ever entered now looked like he was trying to hold himself together with his fingernails. The room watched him. Mr. Furusawa watched him. Willa watched him. A long beat. The narrator holds it, lets the silence do the work. Then Gregory spoke. His voice was rough, stripped of performance, the voice of a man who had just lost a fight with himself. A promise is a promise. He pulled out his phone. Right there, on stage, in front of everyone. Called his financial manager. The room was so quiet you could hear the line ringing through the speaker. Transfer $1 million to Willa Brooks tonight. He said her name, the first time he'd ever used it. The room gasped, then erupted. Not rehearsed applause. The kind of noise that happens when 200 people witness something they didn't think was possible 5 minutes ago. But here's the thing. The money mattered. Of course it mattered. $1 million changes a life. But it wasn't the money that broke Gregory Ashford. It was the mirror. He stepped down from the podium. The crowd parted. He walked toward Willa, each step slower than the last, like a man walking toward something he wasn't sure he deserved to face. He stood in front of her. For a moment, nothing came out. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I owe you an apology. The room went still again. Not just for tonight. For every morning I walked past you like you were part of the wallpaper. For every time I looked through you instead of at you. For every time I assumed that the uniform was all there was. He reached into his jacket. Not for his phone this time. For something small. He held it out in his open palm. A gold lapel pin. Shaped like a bridge. The symbol of the Ashford Foundation. Given only to what Gregory called honored partners. Board members. Major donors. People who mattered. Never once given to staff. This is yours, he said. Willa looked at the pin, then at Gregory. She took it, held it between her fingers, studied it the way she studied new words. Carefully, completely. Thank you, Mr. Ashford. Then she said something quieter, so only he could hear. But I was never invisible. You just weren't looking. Gregory flinched, not from cruelty, from truth. The kind of truth that doesn't shout. It just stands there and waits for you to catch up. Before the room could settle, Douglas Bennington stood up. He didn't rush, didn't raise his voice. He walked to the microphone with the calm of a man who had already made his decision hours ago. I've heard enough, and I've seen enough. The room turned. Willa Brooks, I would like to offer you a position at Pennington & Cole Global, Senior Cultural Liaison and Interpreter. Full salary, full benefits, effective immediately. He paused. If you'll have us. The room exploded again, louder this time, chairs scraping, people standing. Someone at the back whistled. Willa's hands, which had finally stopped shaking, started again. She pressed them together, looked at Pennington, the man who remembered her name. She nodded. Once, just once. But her face carried the expression of someone stepping through a door she had stared at for 15 years. Then Mr. Furusawa approached. The room quieted to hear him. He spoke in Japanese first, then paused and repeated himself in English so everyone would understand. My company also has need of your talents. But tonight, I want to give you something more important than a job. He held out a gift, a hardcover book. Willa took it, turned it over in her hands. The Complete Works of Matsuo Basho, First Edition, in Japanese, worth more than anything she had ever held. Mr. Furusawa opened the cover. He had already inscribed it. In Japanese calligraphy, brush strokes so precise they looked like they'd been painted with a steady heartbeat. The narrator translates, To the deepest river, may you never be silent again. Willa looked at the book. Then she reached into her apron pocket, took out the $2 dictionary, held them side by side. The book that started everything, and the book that proved where it could go. Two objects. One cost $2, the other was priceless. Together they told the entire story of her life. She pressed them both against her chest, and for the first time in the script, she closed her eyes. Not to hide, to hold the moment. Near the service doors, something else was happening. The staff had gathered, caterers still in their aprons, housekeepers in their black uniforms, the kitchen crew with flour on their sleeves. They stood in a cluster near the back wall, watching through the gap in the doors. They started to clap, not the polished applause of the guests. Something rougher, harder. The kind of applause that comes from hands that scrub and carry and lift all day. The sound of people who know exactly what it feels like to be unseen, celebrating one of their own being seen at last. Carl Davis stood among them. His eyes were wet. He caught Willa's gaze across the room, across 200 guests, across every chandelier and champagne glass and silk dress between them. He mouthed 2 words. I told you. Willa laughed. A real laugh. Open, unguarded, surprising even to her. The kind of laugh that escapes before you can catch it. The sound of someone putting down something heavy they've been carrying for a very long time. The 2 worlds were visible in the same frame. Crystal chandeliers above, service uniforms below, guests in the light, staff in the margins. And for this one moment, the wall between them was made of glass. One more thing happened before the night moved on. Elena Ashford found Willa near the garden doors, away from the crowd. She didn't apologize. She wasn't ready for that. But she said quietly, I didn't know. I should have. I'm sorry I didn't. Willa looked at her, not with anger, not with forgiveness either. Something in between. You couldn't know what you weren't willing to see. Elena absorbed that, nodded slowly, walked away. Not everyone changes at the same speed, but the door cracked open, even if just by an inch. 3 months later, Willa Brooks walked into an office with her name on the door. The nameplate read, Willa Brooks, Senior Cultural Liaison, Pennington & Cole Global. 12th floor, corner office. a window that looked out over a city she used to clean for a living. She set two things on her desk before anything else: the $2 dictionary and the Basho book. Side by side, where they belonged. Not in her apron pocket anymore. On display. Her first week, she led a meeting with an international client team, 12 people from 4 countries. She opened in Japanese, switched to French for the European partners, closed in Portuguese for the Brazilian delegation, all in the same hour. Her colleagues watched with their mouths slightly open, the kind of silence that isn't confusion. It's awe. She enrolled in a part-time linguistics degree. Not because she needed it, she'd already proven she didn't, but because she wanted to. Because for the first time in her life, someone had built the stairs to the door she'd always been able to see. The $1 million. People always ask about the money. She kept some, enough to live without fear for the first time in her adult life. Enough to stop calculating whether she could afford both groceries and the electric bill in the same week. The rest she used to start something. The Brooks Language Initiative, a foundation offering free language learning resources to children in foster care. Books, apps, tutors, conversation partners, everything she never had and had to build for herself. She told a reporter, "Every child deserves a way to say, 'I'm here,' in whatever language they need. Nobody should have to whisper through a wall to be heard." And Gregory Ashford? He didn't disappear from the story. That would be too easy. And life isn't that clean. He quietly tripled the funding for his foundation's scholarship programs. He didn't announce it, didn't hold a press conference, didn't put his name on it. For the first time in his life, he did something generous without making sure everyone was watching. Maybe shame, properly felt, can be its own kind of teacher. He ran into Willa once, months later, at a Pennington and Cole event. She was wearing a blazer. He was wearing a suit that cost more than her old monthly salary. They stood in the same room as equals for the first time. He nodded. She nodded back. No words, but the nod was different now. It wasn't the nod of a man looking down. It was the nod of a man looking across. Sometimes that's all redemption looks like. Not a speech, not a grand gesture, just a man finally learning where to point his eyes. The last image is this. Willa in her office, late evening. Everyone else has gone home. The city lights are glowing outside her window, the hum of the building settling around her. She opens her desk drawer, takes out the $2 dictionary, opens it to a page she dog-eared years ago, a Japanese word, ikigai. It means a reason for being. Next to the printed definition in pencil, in the handwriting of a 19-year-old girl who had nothing and no one, 2 words, still looking. She picks up a pen, draws a slow, steady line through those 2 words. Underneath, she writes, "Found it." She closes the book, puts it back, turns off the light, goes home. So here's what I'll ask you to do. It's small, but it matters. Tomorrow, look at someone the world has trained you to look past. The person who cleans your office, the cashier, the driver. Look them in the eye and say thank you like you mean it. You have no idea what river runs beneath the surface. And if you're the one being overlooked right now, if you're the Willa in someone else's house, hear me. Your talent is not diminished by their blindness. Keep going. Your stage is being built. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs it today. Drop a comment. Tell me, who is the Willa Brooks in your life? And remember, your worth was never invisible. They just forgot to look.